The political debate over our ongoing border crisis continues as the Biden administration works to tear down barriers that make illegal passage into the country easier. Now, in Christian circles, this political debate has spawned a theological debate as well, where some appear to be arguing that allowing open borders is essentially a matter of Christian love. As Christians, we're commanded to love our neighbor. Is it loving to allow everyone to enter the country whenever they wish? And must we choose between honoring the Great Commission and respecting the rule of law? Joining me now for this Worldview segment is David Closson. He's the director of our Center for Biblical Worldview at Family Research Council. David, good to see you today.
Great to be with you, Joseph.
Now, first, let's just not bury the lead in this conversation. Is it unloving to tell people who want to come into the country that they can't?
No, Joseph, it's not unloving. Now, I think in this conversation as Christians, we are the people who in this conversation can remind all of us that all people are made in God's image and have inherent value and inherent dignity. And I think that's important to state. However, we can say more than that. And one of the things that we need to add is that not everyone has the freedom or biblical mandate to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I think the Bible gives us clear guidelines that borders and nations and national sovereignty are good things. Government, according to Romans 13, is ordained for the good of the citizens living in that country. And so, in short, Joseph, no, I don't think it's unloving to say that Christians shouldn't support or shouldn't be in favor of an open border policy.
Well, let's try to understand then why this debate is happening, because this debate is raging in Christian circles, on the internet and other places, and this idea that, hey, these are people who are genuinely in need, and that is, of course, true in many cases. We know that bad actors can exploit loopholes that might exist to do bad things, but nobody's suggesting that's the supermajority of people who want to come to the country. If you think it's an easy answer that it's not unloving to say, no, you need to stay in your own country until you can come here legally, why do so many people find that to be a persuasive argument, persuasive enough that they're making that argument, that they're saying that we as Christians need to welcome the nations? Right. It's a matter of hospitality, that if they want to come, we should allow that. Otherwise, we're being unkind.
Yeah, and I think the main theological argument, Joseph, that I'm seeing made in this country, usually by those kind of on the left, is this argument of love of neighbor. And that's a right Christian impulse. Jesus himself was asked, who is my neighbor? And in response, in Luke 10, he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And the result of that story is an awareness that all of us have an obligation to everyone else. And in one sense, a Christian can legitimately say that everyone is our neighbor. And so that love of neighbor, broadly, generally construed, I think is what drives a lot of this language. But there's more in the Bible, Joseph. I'm thinking of 1 Timothy 5:8, where we know that we have, there is some sort of love that we owe to anyone that comes across our path. But there's a first responsibility to those in our immediate circles, kind of the principle of subsidiarity. 1 Timothy 5:8 is where Paul actually says that if anyone does not provide for his household, he's worse than an unbeliever. And so I think that's why Christians have historically understood that there are, again, the principle of subsidiarity, those who are closest to you, your family, then maybe your community, then your nation, there's maybe a greater degree of love that is owed.
That's an interesting point, and I see parallels in the Ten Commandments, because we know the Ten Commandments is not just one commandment. Included in the Ten Commandments are "Thou shalt not kill," which is, of course, because these are image bearers, and you can't kill people because you want to, because you find them to be frustrating. You also are not allowed to steal, which is a recognition that other people have property. It's the foundation of property rights. They can own things. And that means by virtue of their ownership, they can deny you rights, access, privileges related to that property that you might desire. And in order to take that from somebody who has the ownership of that thing, that's called stealing. And God specifically commands us not to do that. Is it appropriate to analogize the prohibition against theft to nations? Are homes like nations for a community of people where there's this principle that says the people who own the home, who own the nation, they have the legal authority to make rules that determine, among other things, egress and ingress, which means you might want to come in, but you can't. It's the same principle that we all will use at our homes tonight when we go to sleep. There are undoubtedly people within a radius of our homes who would like to sleep there if they knew that it was an opportunity, but we lock our doors anyway to deny them that desire. Is that a fair conclusion based on just what God tells us in the Ten Commandments?
I think it is, Joseph. I think in the Ten Commandments, and I think also Romans 13, the purpose of government. I kind of want to correct what I said a second ago, where I said there's a greater degree of love for different people. I think what I should have said is that I think that love manifests itself in different ways in different situations. Yes, everyone's made in God's image, but Joseph, is it actually a true love of neighbor to say that we should be in favor of a system that incentivizes illegal smuggling and human trafficking that brings all sorts of depravities on people, a system that incentivizes people putting their own families in precarious situations, or again, the system that really creates a whole underclass that operates outside the reach of the law, so to speak. And so again, I think this concept of love of neighbor, we need to have a more nuanced way of looking at it. But I do think the analogy that you just gave, Joseph, is helpful. And I just point people to the article you wrote that's on frc.org/worldview, where I think you even kind of extrapolate that a little bit further.
Yeah, and I think the argument for allowing people to come into the country just because they want to is honestly consistent with a lot of left-wing arguments in general, whether it's abortion or gender or the ability, the decriminalization of all sorts of things. The idea that the desire is the justification, that it's appropriate for you to do it because you want it. And that's also at the heart of this. Now, not denying real needs that exist, we have to reject the principle that just because someone wants something means they should have it. Wherever they got that idea, it wasn't from Scripture. But we can continue to tease all that out. David Closson, thanks for your time, for being with us.
Thank you, Joseph.